All right. Well, we're going to get started. So my name is Julia. Welcome to our French picnic adventure. I am the new owner of Formaggio Kitchen as of December. I've been at Formaggio Kitchen for about 16 years, working in a number of different capacities. It started out as a 3-month job and snowballed into what it is today, career, passion. I just got back from Provence less than a week ago, where I mastered the art of French picnicking. So I'm super excited to share with you kind of what I picked up along the way. And what we're going to be doing tonight is just kind of exploring the delights of a French picnic, kind of how to compose a really nice, well-rounded board, and of course, talk a little bit about the history and producers behind all these amazing products. This is a class for you, a discussion for you. So at any point, you can feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions. You can use the chat box if you'd like. Really, whatever you need to know, I'm happy to help. And so today, what we're going to be doing is going through everything. So hopefully everybody has all of your cheeses and meats all set up. I've created a little board for myself. Perfect. All right. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be starting with some of the cheeses. But more than anything, I want to talk a little bit about sort of what the French picnic is supposed to be. And what was something that was really fun in Provence is we were visiting a lot of producers. My husband came with me, and we didn't know how long these visits would last. And so we didn't know if we didn't want to pose ourselves on anyone for lunch or anything like that. And we're in really, really rural areas of Provence. So it made a lot of sense to always have cheese and charcuterie and wine in the trunk of our car. And we just traveled with it the whole time. And it actually became really handy because if we wanted a snack, if we, one of our producers, Le Brusque, which is a Provençal honey producer, said, do you want to join me for a picnic on my terrace for lunch today? And we said, sure. We have some cheeses and wine we can contribute. And it was just a very natural, he pulled about 7 cheeses out of his fridge that he just happened to have handy. And we just spread everything out and enjoyed. We didn't finish everything, and you just wrap it back up and put it back in the fridge. And what I really love about it is every park that we went to all around, if we were in the cities in Provence, everybody was picnicking. It's such a natural part of the culture. Whereas if you go to Italy and Rome, they actually specifically, you'll get stopped by the police if you picnic because you're not allowed to picnic. You're not allowed to eat like that in public places. So it's a very different cultural set of rules and expectations, which is fascinating. And again, I think a lot of it goes to the French sort of love of food and love of sharing food, but also the casual nature of good food, where you don't have to be at a Michelin star restaurant to enjoy the best cheeses in the world. They're exposed to incredible bakeries, incredible charcuterie, incredible cheeses at any given time. And so you can enjoy it at any time in any place. And so that's what we're doing tonight. And so what we tried to do is I tried to put together what would be, consistent of a really nice classic French picnic. So we're going to start with the cheeses, and we're going to just work our way through and talk a little bit about what we picked out for you. So this cheese, I cut myself a half, but you all got a whole of the Motte-sur-Foie. This is a cheese from the Loire Valley in France. And this is a wonderful cheese that sits on a little chestnut leaf, which actually makes it a really nice picnic option because oftentimes, you know, you'll just lay this out on a table, not necessarily even a board. And what I'd recommend is having it with a little bit of this. So this is a French apricot jam. This is Confiture de Raphael. So you may have gotten apricot, you may have gotten fig, raspberry, strawberry. I did the apricot for myself, and you'll notice one thing about the jam is it's much looser in consistency than most American jams. And that's super, super classic and traditional of a French jam, because there's no pectin in or very little pectin added to the jam. The whole idea of French jam is to highlight the quality of the fruit. And so a lot of times these producers will grow their own fruit or have growers very nearby and make the jam with really, really fresh fruit. And so the goal is to manipulate it as little as possible so that you're tasting the true quality of the fruit. And I don't know how your piece of moté sur feuille looks, but as you can see, mine has a tiny bit of molding to it. You can see a little bit of blue mold. I actually like it when there's a little bit more blue mold. And that's something, thank you. Yeah, so you have a little bit of natural molding. Your guys's pieces definitely look very, very pristine. Awesome. So one thing that I absolutely love about France, awesome. Okay, great. So yours has a little bit of bluing, which is really good. And one thing that I'm excited to do later in the fall is a showcase on blue mold, because as Americans, oftentimes we're afraid of it. We're not used to seeing it on our food. Even in blue cheese, it can be scary for some people. When you go to a cheese shop in France, a lot of the goat cheeses like this have speckles of blue mold on it. Sometimes they're consumed in blue mold. And it's not a negative. It is just a different representation of that cheese. And so I actually like to have cheeses that are a little bit the goat cheeses like this that are a little bit firmer and have a little bit more oomph to them in a picnic setting, because they travel really well. They've developed a little bit more rind. When you look at this cheese, it's almost 3-in-1 when you cut it, because you have the rind on the outside, which the rind is a geotrichum rind, that sort of brain-like quality of the texture of the rind is going to have the most pronounced flavor. That's where you're going to get I don't even want to say pungency, because it's not a particularly pungent cheese, but it's going to have the most intense flavor. Right below that, right here, where it's a little bit more yellow, is called the cream line. And that's where it's ripening right below the rind. And that part of the cheese tends to be the creamiest and the saltiest and the milkiest. And then the very, very, very interior is going to be, and this depends, how big that interior is, depends on how old that cheese is. That is going to represent sort of the bright, fresh, clean goat cheese. And so you really do get kind of 3-in-1. And so that's why I encourage people the number one question we get is, can I eat the rind? And the answer is, give it a try. If you like it, if it helps to, if it makes the experience better, then absolutely try it. It's definitely part of the process and part of the production. But just because you don't like the rind on this one doesn't mean that you wouldn't like the rind on this cheese if it were a bit younger. So keep exploring, keep trying it. And I'm going to give myself a taste of this too. But while I do, what did you think about that first pairing of the goat cheese? And I just kind of thumbs up. Awesome.
The jam is wonderful.
Isn't the jam fantastic?
Mm-hmm.
This is made old fashioned in Brittany, France, with copper pots. And again, it's all about the fruit. And that's what it is in the end. And they do such a brilliant job I mean, obviously they have some really beautiful fruit grown in France, but just highlighting the fruit and not worrying about a super gelatinous texture and not cooking it down too much just changes it really is bright and fresh.
It's really delicious. It's fantastic.
Good, good.
We're having it with the French bread we got from one of your other events that you told us to freeze.
How's it working?
It's so good. It's still good. I thought it couldn't really be good. And it's so
awesome.
good.
That is awesome. Now beverage. So obviously wine is the default. But I wanted to give you a really classic traditional, like if you're having lunch and you're working, like a lot of people I was noticing would take a picnic on their lunch break. And Badois is a very, very, very popular French sparkling mineral water. And what's interesting about the Badois is it's actually naturally sparkling. So how it is produced, it is actually naturally sparkling. And then let me grab my juice. And this is Nectars de Bourgogne, which is a little French Burgundy fruit juice. And the idea is I made myself a little mixer essentially, and you can make it as sweet or as not sweet as you want. I put a splash of the juice in. You can see how much I used. You can make it a lot sweeter with just a hint of bubbles, but it's just a really, really nice, refreshing complement to the picnic that's non-alcoholic. These fruit juices are absolutely amazing. They are really, really good on their own, but for me, I love mixing them with a little bit of bubbles because whether it's alcoholic or non, because it's really just the quality of the fruit is fantastic. So, it's just like kind of almost like having fresh raspberries in your sparkling water. And again, trying to keep with the same idea of pairing and thinking of what would pair nicely with all the cheeses. But how do you like the beverage? Refreshing? Awesome. A squeeze of lemon juice too would go a really long ways with this.
It's fantastic.
Good. All right. We're going to head to the Pyrenees now. And with the Pyrenees, we're going to so the idea again with a French picnic is everything is meant to go together. You can pair every one of these items with each other. They all are meant to be harmonious. And so it doesn't really matter. There's not like the goat cheese has to go with the apricot jam and vice versa. So the Pyrenees is going to be the Equiola Artigasna Fermier. Does everybody have that one? That looks like the Comté. That's the one. That's the ticket. Yep. I will. This is how you know you're a cheesemonger. If you can spot a cheese by Zoom, then you're good to go. So it is the one that is, if you compare the two hard cheeses, one of them is much darker yellow. That's the Comté. And you can see it's much smoother in the paste, whereas the Equiola Artigasna is a little bit lighter in color and has a much more rustic paste. It has a much more rustic rind. We're going to be looking at the Equiola. And I think the first thing to do, I live in the city, and so we're going to get all the lovely noises of the city, including a helicopter. So the joys of an outdoor Zoom. The Equiola, the name is really important to kind of describe how special this cheese is. Equiola is the producer. Artigasna means sheep cheese in the Basque dialect. So now you know that it is a Basque cheese. Fermier is what makes it so rare. Fermier means that it's a farmhouse cheese. And what that means is that the people who are making the cheese and aging the cheese are also the ones who have the animals. So in this case, the sheep. So it's a shepherd who is making cheese and aging cheese on his farm. And that is really, really rare in the Pyrenees because of the system that they've set up. And so we have to establish these relationships by traveling a lot. And it really takes, a face to face. And that's why we were in Provence last week to say hello to these producers. And the honey producer I had worked with for 15 years, but we'd never met face to face. So it's so important to put a face to, a phone call or an email. And also for us, doing the legwork to research and make sure that the production practices are, what we expect them to be, what they said they were, because that is when we're establishing new relationships with producers, it nearly always starts out with a visit. And that's super important because we want to establish quality and make sure that we have a good understanding of what their production is actually like. So this cheese is a Basque cheese, which actually is kind of thematic with several of the products that we have, including, I put it behind my screen, this little Basque mustard. So this is a mustard with pimenta spilette. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the cheese, but I want you to play around with that and the Bayonne ham, which I rolled up myself. The Bayonne ham, because that is also from the Basque area. All three of those are really complementary. And that's a really, the first pairing was a more sweet pairing. And now we're moving on to a much more savory, spicy pairing. And so Pyrenees sheep cheese is absolutely unmatched. It is unlike any other cheese in the world. Sheep's milk has the highest fat content of the three major milk types, cow, sheep, and goat. And because of that, you'll notice the texture just coats your palate. And that coating of the palate, I find, makes it a wonderful cheese to pair with wines and a diverse range of wines, but also other products, because it really is like a warm blanket for your palate, and everything else is just highlighted and accentuated. These Pyrenees Brebis are not known for being aggressive. It's not like, a 2, 3, 4-year-old Gouda that's going to be really intense and sweet and biting. It's a cheese that's subtle and really nuanced. And that's kind of what I love about it. There's a lot going on. And the shepherds that make these cheeses, I went backpacking in the Pyrenees a long, long time ago. And it is absolutely fascinating because there are no fences. The sheep just roam all throughout the hills and the mountains. They have spray paint on their butts to determine, which sheep belong to which farmer. And it is, when we were hiking, we would hike up the mountain and see a little wooden sign that said Brebis on the trail. And we'd follow the sign because in French, Brebis meant sheep milk cheese. And so, of course, we were like, follow the sign that says cheese. So veered off the trail and we'd end up at a little shepherd's hut. And there'd be a table set up with several wheels of cheese on the table, whole wheels, and then a cut wheel in a cloche, a cutting board, a knife, a money box, a scale, a calculator, and a little sign that says euros per kilogram. And it was just cut your own cheese. And so you cut your piece of cheese, you'd weigh it, they'd give you a little cheese paper to wrap it up. No one was there. You pop the money in the box and you'd move on. And that's how a lot of these farmers would sustain. And that's why I said that farmhouse cheeses, farmhouse Brebis are very rare, because there's a system set up in the Pyrenees where all these small farmers make that cheese and then immediately send it to an affineur in a larger area. And an affineur is someone who ages the cheese. So the farmers only have to worry about making the cheese and then they send it off. And the way it's set up and why it's lasted for so long, it's called the DIME system, it's spelled DIME, is because no money is exchanged. And so it's fascinating because these small farmers don't have to put any money up front. And so it creates a more sustainable system of selling their cheese. So say a farmer makes 10 wheels of cheese and sends it to the affineur to age, and 4 months later, 6 months later, the affineur says, your cheeses are done. I'm going to send you back 8 wheels of cheese. And so the payment is actually those 2 wheels of cheese. So the majority of brebis that you see in the United States, in Paris, in any of the larger cities come from those affineurs. They don't actually come direct from the farmers. And there's nothing against that. It's a beautiful system that supports these small producers, but it just highlights how rare and special it is to find a cheese that is aged by the farmer. And what we've noticed about this cheese and how it's different from a lot of other brebis is the rusticity, is the fact that the rind is very different, which is, makes perfect sense. It's a different cave than a lot of these other larger caves. It's a more rustic aging environment. And so you get a lot more rustic of a rind. And this is a rind that I would say at a certain age, the rind doesn't add anything to the cheese. It gets a little hard. This is the age, I would say, kind of the max age where the rind actually does contribute positively to the cheese. That being said, to each their own. We've had people come in and request Comté rinds just to gnaw on, which, again, each their own. I will never judge anybody for eating more cheese. But you'll notice with this, it's a really complex cheese that I think has a lot of earthiness to it. What do y'all think about the cheese?
Really nice. It has a nice spectrum. It's not like a single palate pleaser,
Exactly.
right? It's very aromatic in your mouth. Really.
Absolutely. And I think you can have a cheese that doesn't whap you over the head. That's still interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of nuance and a lot of, I call them peaks and valleys. It's a raw milk cheese. So you're getting all the expression of the milk in there, and the earthiness of the rind definitely permeates into the cheese itself. And I think this is a slightly older batch than, we have it in our caves for a certain period of time. And so as it ages, it does get sort of more of that earthiness. And that's why I thought it would be nice to pair with the jambon bayonne and the mustard, because those are a little bit more intense flavors, but I think it can hold up to it. And that mustard is honestly, like, we've actually carried it. I bought it for the store for years and years and years and have always enjoyed it, but never been obsessed with it until this year. And then I started using it in vinaigrettes, and I'm now obsessed. And I've been going through jar after jar after jar, because pimenta spilette is a pepper, a red pepper that's only grown in the Basque region of France. It's not too spicy. It's got a lot of flavor, got a lot of sort of rich, round red pepper flavor, and just a bit of heat on the finish. And so it is very, very famous in the Basque area as a dried red pepper flake. But this is incorporated into a mustard, so you get all the quality of that red pepper, but also the joy of having a mustard. And so I just think that having that alongside the cheese is, sorry, I'm making myself a little piece. You get that beautiful bright red color from the pepper. It's not too spicy. It's not going to knock your socks off. I think the spice level matches kind of heat that you get from mustard.
So you make a vinaigrette out of the mustard that we have?
Yeah.
Can you tell us how you do that?
Yeah. So what I do is, whether it's vinegar based or lemon based, I always love to pickle either fresh onion or garlic. So a quick pickle is just chopping up the fresh onion or garlic and throwing it in whatever acid I'm using, lemon juice or vinegar, for about 5 or 10 minutes. And that usually gives me time to chop up all the other things that I'm using. And then I will throw in a scoop of this mustard and whisk that in there. Sometimes I'll add an egg yolk if I want it to be a thicker, creamier dressing. Otherwise, I'll leave the egg yolk out and then just mix in some olive oil. And it's such a great, simple vinaigrette. And I use it, it's my go-to if I always overestimate how much asparagus I'm going to eat. So I cook too much and then I have it as leftovers and I've always had this weird thing where I don't eat leftovers exactly as they were for the original meal because it never lives up to what it originally was. So I chop up the asparagus and I mix it into my vinaigrette and throw it on top of a salad and it's awesome. And just I use mustard a lot in vinaigrettes, but this one in particular is just, I like the coarse whole grain mustard. I like the fact that the pimento spalette gives it a little bit of spice. Just kind of every element of it is really, really, really nice. But what do you all think?
It's not overly harsh. It's a kind of a gentle mustard, and it goes very well with that cheese and very well with the ham.
Good, good. Yeah, and this ham is, if I could scream from the rooftops about this ham, I would, because everybody knows prosciutto, everybody knows jamon serrano, nobody knows jamon bayonne or jambon bayonne. I think this easily rivals both prosciutto or jamon serrano. They're all made in the same style. They're just all salt cured pork. A lot of the differences between the three are, when you make these traditionally, you have the variances of the season. So some seasons are a little bit more humid. And so the makers kind of adjust the salt and the curing to account for that. And so now it's done in a little bit more modern mechanisms, but they still are adjusting the humidity and temperatures to try to accurately replicate sort of a more natural, traditional curing style. And so what I love about jambon bayonne is that I find prosciutto to be on the sweetest end of the spectrum. For hams, it tends to be, and don't get me wrong, I love all the hams, but prosciutto is very, very sweet, and jamon serrano or jamon iberico tends to be much more intense and slightly gamey and saltier, whereas jambon bayonne is almost like a marriage of the two, where you get a really dense, intense ham flavor. You get a little bit of gaminess, a little bit of sweetness, but it's all really, really, really well balanced. Has anybody had Bayonne ham before? And what do you think?
Definitely tasty. Very, very tasty.
It's great. It's great.
It's salty enough that it can hold up to the mustard, the cheese, and one of the most important elements on your plate, the cornichon. That pickly element. I should have known not to eat a whole bite of ham while talking. That pickly element, for me, it's on every charcuterie plate, on every cheese board. The cornichon is a must-have because you need that acidic bite to cut the fat. I always like to think about fat to acid ratio. And obviously we have the acid when it comes to the beverage, you have the acid when it comes to the jam, to the mustard, but having something this acidic it's almost palate cleansing, and it helps you kind of refresh your palate and then keep chowing down. So I always love either a giardiniera, which is a really classic Italian pickle, or cornichon is like the easiest, safest, most delicious option. That absolutely wonderful. All right. And one of my favorite pairings with cornichon is this cheese, the Comté Lefort. So I'm going to cut a little piece of that off. And all right. And that is this one here. And you'll notice, so when you think about the wheels of cheese, everything influences the final flavor. So the size of the cheese, the make of the cheese. So that Ecuola Artigasna Fermier that we made is about this big around, and then about that tall. Each wheel weighs about 9 to 12 pounds. So not a massive, massive cheese. This wheel of the Comté is about 80 pounds. And so it is actually about the same width as the Ecuola Artigasna Fermier, sort of the same height, about yay big, but it is massive. And what's really special about this cheese, it's from the Jura, so the French Alps, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with Gruyere. Everybody had Gruyere before? Has anybody had Comté before? Couple yeses, a lot of no's. So Comté is French Gruyere, and it actually used to be called French Gruyere until the Swiss gained rights to the name Gruyere exclusively. And so anything made in Switzerland could be called Gruyere, but nothing could be called Gruyere outside of Switzerland. And so the French named it Comté. And what's really special about this cheese, it is a raw milk cheese, but it is cooked pressed cheese. And so when you make cheese, you separate the curds and the whey, and it's the milk that has to be pasteurized for the cheese to be pasteurized. The milk has to be heated. So it's a raw milk cheese. They separate the curds and the whey, and the curds go into that giant form, which, creates this 80-pound wheel. And that at that point, the curds are gently heated and pressed. And so that heating of it, when you think about what you need to make a really smooth paste like that, is to expel moisture, because you don't want a cheese that has too much moisture. Otherwise, you're not going to get the right texture to have a really smooth developed cheese. So there's several ways that you can remove moisture from cheese, and the number one being salt. However, when you're in the mountains, high up in the Alps, salt is not something that is easily attainable when you think about when this cheese was created. And so I'm always fascinated by cheese and sort of the history, the anthropological history of cheese, because so much of why cheese is made is due to the sort of regional necessities and how people had to make something. And so the way to expel moisture from this cheese was to gently cook the curd and actually press it. So you're wheeling it down. So you're pressing the cheese tighter and tighter to expel more and more whey. And that's why this cheese has such a beautiful, delicate, smooth paste. We work with the affineur Marcel Petit. And now you know affineur is someone who ages cheese. And Marcel Petit, the previous owner, Isan, wanted to bring in these cheeses about 30 years ago. And they said, absolutely not, you're American. Because Americans don't know anything about cheese, or so was thought. And so why would we send you this premier cheese when it won't be appreciated? And so Isan fought and fought and fought and really argued a case to say, we're creating a place where cheese is respected and cherished and spoken about and educated about. And so after time, they allowed him to start purchasing their wheels of cheese, but it wasn't just a gimme. It was, they would bring him in and they would plug a wheel. And so you literally do a borehole in the cheese and they pull it out and they give you a tiny taste from the core. And then you plug the cheese back up and you seal it so that it doesn't actually affect the aging of the cheese. And they say, what do you taste? And so you have to say, I taste lavender, hazelnuts, and then it's toasted hazelnuts or raw hazelnuts. And there's no indication of whether or not what you're saying is correct or incorrect, but just a nod, and then they move on to the next wheel. And you have to hope, that you are providing them with confidence, that you know what you're talking about and that you're getting the best wheels. And luckily, the previous owner was wonderful and had a wonderful palate and was able to establish that relationship with Marcel Petit. And over the years, we were able to get more and more wheels in. And not only that, at a higher and higher grade, because they're not going to just start you out at the Comte Lafort. You have to earn it. And so you earn it over time. And so it took many, many years. When I first started working 16 years ago, we got one wheel of Comte Grand Cru, which was just older than this. And now we're getting dozens of wheel of Comte Grand Cru in, because again, establishing more and more of a relationship. And so the way that we present our Comte is in different age ranges, everything from 12 months all the way up to 36 months. So at any given time, we'll have between 6 to 8 different types of Comte on our cheese wall. And so this is actually one of our more premier Comtes, one of the older Comtes. And I think it exhibits one of my favorite features of the Comte, which is the balance of the nuttiness and sort of rich milkiness, but also having sweet undertones, because that's a big difference, I think, between Comte and Gruyere, is the sort of sweet quality of the milk. And so
what was the age on this again? I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. This one is about 24 months.
About 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at them online, are they graded by age then?
They are. They have a name associated with them.
Mm-hmm.
But so it starts with Melodie and then goes to Gourmandise and then goes to Fort Saint Antoine and then to Le Fort and then to Grand Cru and then Extra Grand Cru. So all the different ages of the cheeses have different names associated with them, but the age itself is listed in a description.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then of course, that is the age in which it's sold to us. So sometimes it does end up in our cave for a few more months, usually no more than 4 months, but because our cheese cave is set up as a proper cave with the humidity, the cheese does age properly as it stays in the cave, which is a nice feature. And actually the reason why Marcel Petit is such a sought after affineur, because he's the first Comte affineur that really started playing and looking into humidity in aging the cheeses and experimenting more with higher levels of humidity and how that would affect the outcome of the cheese. And obviously, and now his Comtes are the most world-renowned Comtes. So clearly he was on to something. My husband's an engineer and now he's obsessed with the cheese cave and humidity. So we will see what comes of that with this new venture. So who knows, maybe we'll have a new, very high-tech engineered cave in our future.
We decided to make the crozes soufflette using the recipe that you enclosed.
Yeah.
And we used half of the Comte, and then we had some Gruyere, and we used that for the cheese ingredient.
Oh, wonderful.
And they did taste similar, but, somewhat different.
Yeah.
And so we'll have that later tonight after the picnic. But and this is a really, we hadn't seen pasta in those tiny little squares before. So that was really kind of fascinating, but we enjoyed putting that all together.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, the crozettes are really unique to Savoie, and I love buckwheat so much. And that's a really, really wonderful little classic buckwheat pasta that is just, a wonderful traditional, very simple shape, and just, yeah, it's just wonderful that not many people know about. So it's nice to be able to share it. All right, so we've done the Comté. We're on to kind of the dessert round, so to speak. Um, and does anybody have any questions up to this point? All right. So, what we have for dessert, I love pairing pâte de fruits with cheese. So you all got your little pâte de fruits, the fruit jellies?
Good jelly.
So these could be just a straight dessert, but they are at essence, fruit. And so they do really, really pair nicely with the cheeses. And so I thought it would be fun if you did get the add-on cheese, which is the bleu de roux, which is I shouldn't have picked that up, but I apologize. I'm gonna have to lick my fingers after this. If you got the bleu de roux, I recommend that you pair the pâte de fruits with the bleu de roux. If not, I'd say honestly it would go with any of the cheeses really nicely, but probably the Comté or the Acquiola the best. So this pâte de fruits comes to us from Cruzeil, and they are known for their candied fruit. They are the premier candied fruit producer in France, and they do everything from candied orange peel, candied lemon peel, to whole candied fruit. I actually once bought a whole candied pineapple from them, literally a whole pineapple, because my curiosity was just off the charts because I wanted to see what a whole candied pineapple was like. So that was fascinating, because their whole process is candying the fruits whole gently in sugar. And then they do a glaze and it helps to preserve it for, years. And but they also do these fruit jellies made with really, really high quality fruit and fruit juices. And so there's a variety of different types. They used to make, I'm actually quite sad they discontinued it. They used to make a pimenta spalette fruit jelly, which I was obsessed with. And everybody was obsessed with, but they discontinued it. And that was a favorite of mine with Brebis. But taking a little piece of this cheese and a little bit of that fruit jelly is just such a fun combination. And again, you eat the fruit jelly with all the cheeses, but then you pop one in your mouth at the very end. That's dessert and you're good to go. And that's kind of what I love about the idea of a French picnic is that, it should be mobile, it should be easy. None of these items need refrigeration at all. They can be left out for hours and hours and hours and a day, 2 days. Cheese is one of the hardiest things. I think one of the hardest things for us to educate people on is the fact that cheese is a living, breathing thing that actually protects itself. So it doesn't abide by the typical sort of food safety laws of 4 hours and it's done. Cheese really has a lot of longevity. Obviously, the quality, if it's an 80-degree day, you might end up with cheese soup, but it can affect the texture and the quality of the cheese over time. But if it's not, too hot out, if it's 70 degrees, 60 degrees, cheese holds up brilliantly. And that's why it's a wonderful option to take with you outside on a picnic. This blue cheese, blue cheese is definitely a polarizing cheese, especially on a picnic. I love blue cheese. I love this one because I feel like it's not too pungent. This is called bleu de roux, and it's from the Auvergne. And it's also called bleu de Auvergne is sort of a more common name for it. And it's absolutely wonderful and really, really well balanced. The cows that are, if you see kind of the style of the cheeses from the Auvergne, it's all about the milk, the cow's milk. And so they produce cheeses that have the freshest, sort of most lactic qualities, and you get a lot of that in this cheese, balanced with a beautiful, beautiful bluing that is reminiscent to the style of bluing that you get in a Roquefort, but again, made with cow's milk instead of sheep's milk. And I just find it to be a really, really well balanced cheese that's not overpowering. So it's not going to, you could eat this and move on to that goat cheese, and it wouldn't overpower it too much. And then especially if you have a sweet element like the pâte de fruits or the jam, it kind of tones it down even more and kind of takes away some of that salty bite. And a lot of times people kind of are like, wow, what a weird, unique combination. But if you break it down into its most basic flavors, when I taste products, I love to kind of think about the one thing that jumps into my head. And, that could be as simple as salty or as simple as sweet. And we know that salty and sweet go really, really well together. So the idea is to just give it a go and to see if it works. And honestly, most of the time it really does if you have those basic flavor profiles. And that's a fun way to taste things like that. Or the other thing is, if you taste a wine and you say, oh, this has a lot of cherry notes, then I like to think about, okay, well, what cheeses do I like to pair with cherries? And that's how I kind of come together and think about pairing cheeses and wine and things like that. And so if you simplify it and break it down and find those really, one or two flavor notes, it can help pairing really, really, really become a lot of fun, experimental, but also really successful. And that's the goal with a picnic, is not a formal, it's not a formal, fancy, everything has to go with this or this or this or this. The idea of a really good French picnic is, you have everything laid out, everything goes really well together. Of course, the one thing we're missing is a freshly baked French baguette, which unfortunately, that is the one thing that I could not ship to you, but because you have to have it fresh. But really just enjoying everything harmoniously with one another. So what did y'all think of the picnic? Success. Any questions before we head out?
I thought this was very, very, very creative to have this session tonight, because, we got the nice box and we would have enjoyed eating the cheese, but it's much more fun to share it with all of you folks, and also to get your wonderful explanation and, the history of some of the cheeses, the geography. It just made this a really delightful experience. So thank you so much.
And now we want to go to France, right?
Exactly. Well, don't we all though?
We do. We all want to go.
That's the goal of, I grew up in a small town where everybody knew everybody. And the thing I loved about Formaggio Kitchen was, I came out back east for college. I grew up in Eastern Oregon, right kind of near the Idaho border. And I went to college in Boston, and I missed, I would say hi to everybody I passed on the street, and they looked at me like I was absolutely out of my mind, because you do not do that in the city. And I went to Formaggio Kitchen, and the person who helped me, Robert, was the general manager. I still remember. He's the one who hired me. And he knew the names of all the producers. He told the stories about where the cheeses came from. And it reminded me of, and he knew my name, he learned my name. And when I went back, he recognized me, he helped me. And it really, I felt sort of a kindred spirit to how I felt at home, where we grew up growing our own food, hunting, fishing, and knowing where everything came from. And there was just that connection there that I absolutely loved. And so a huge goal of mine in this business has been, how do we create that in our store? If you come to our store, hopefully you feel like it's a neighborhood where we know your name, we talk to you, we tell you the stories, but how do you do that online? And so, as much as I can, I'm going to hop online and share these stories with people, because, everything that is happening today with sort of modernization and everything being AI, I want to kind of go the opposite direction and see how we can't make why can't you make a website personal and feel like you can learn the stories and learn the people behind the products. And so that was my long spiel, but that's the goal of what we're trying to do. So there's going to be a lot more. And the next fun thing that we're going to experiment with, which we've never done, is we're going to start including the public virtually on some of our staff trainings, because we get a lot of producers that come and visit us. And I was thinking, I was like, gosh, this is such an incredible opportunity that a lot of professionals don't even get to enjoy, because, we've been around for 45 years. So we have a really great established relationship with a lot of these producers. So they always stop by and teach our staff. And so to be able to share that with the public and our customers, I think is going to be absolutely amazing. So fingers crossed, hopefully it goes well, and we'll start featuring that, because we've got a producer coming in. Actually, we've got 2 in the next 2 weeks. And so we'll start posting about that pretty soon, just so that people can learn a bit with us. So, but anyways, I hope you all had a really, really good time. I'm actually on my way to meet the person in charge of Comté. He's in town visiting us right now. We have dinner reservations in about 10 minutes. And it's a huge part of our relationship. Just as I said, it's he comes and he inspects our Comté. So while I was giving this class, our cheese buyer was giving him a tour of our Comté to show that we are, preserving the honor of the Comté and showing the cave, and to make sure that it is up to his standards, because like I said, these relationships are everything. And for us, we consider ourselves caretakers of these products. And so for us, it's by respecting the products, we're respecting the producers who put literally their lives into it. I mean, they work so hard to make these things. So it's very special for us to be able to share.
Well, what a fascinating idea to invite all of us to join with you. I thought this was very, very special. So
Good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And it's great to see you other folks too. And hope you all have a great weekend.
Awesome.
And enjoy your cheeses.
Thank you, everybody.
Bon appetit
Bon
tonight.
appetit.
Bon appetit is right. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
So long.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.